society at large, they respect entrepreneurs 2 times more than pastors of the community.
Nearly 7 out of 10 entrepreneurs believe that when the church and when business leaders and entrepreneurs kind of come together, that, man, there's a really good chance of solving some of the big problems of the world.
The way that we're going to make a positive contribution or impact in the communities that our churches sit within is really by empowering the entrepreneurs, business leaders of our communities and of our congregations to take that front row leadership voice.
Bold visionaries, faithful disruptors. Some call them crazy, but they are called to create. Under his power, for his glory. The Faith Driven Entrepreneur Podcast.
Guys, welcome back to the Faith Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. It's always great to be with you. If you've listened before, you've heard me talk about just this childlike wonder of how I've seen the Holy Spirit work in my life and in others' lives around me over the last 10 years. And one of the ways he did that was connecting me with Mark Grunden in an unexpected place. The last day of the Lausanne conference, we got a chance to tour the DMZ at the border of South and North Korea. And it was through that we got a chance to connect, hear his passion for what God was doing around the world in faith and work, and how that led him to be a part of this team. And so we get a chance to unpack what does it look like from the lens of both entrepreneur and pastor, and how faith-driven entrepreneur is stepping in this moment to equip other churches. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm always amazed at how God works, but there are some things that are a little bit unexpected of how he works. And first was us connecting. I mean, of course, most people think about natural places to connect. You might meet somebody at a conference, but you wouldn't expect to meet somebody at the DMZ in South Korea, would you? How did you get on that trip?
That's right. That's so funny. That is our first date.
Bro date. Yeah, first bro date to the DMZ. Yeah.
Was the DMZ in South Korea. I was at the conference there at Lausanne, and I was jumping around from group gathering to group gathering, and then somebody saw me around enough that they decided, hey, maybe Mark needs to be invited to go hang out with us a little
Mark
bit
needs
more.
a field trip. He needs to relax a little bit.
Exactly right. Let's just take him out to the DMZ, and there on a bus ride. That's where the conversation started between you and me.
It's so fun. It's so fun to see how God works. I mean, I went to Lausanne this year. It was fun to be there. It was fun to hear the conference, hear what God's doing around the world. But I mean, I remember going through it with this prayer, just saying, God, connect us to people that need to be a part of this conversation for the next chapter. And unexpected ways, last day of the trip, Mike Sharrow, good friend, says, hey, why don't you come with a group of us going to the DMZ? So Alan Barnhart, Dan Olabi, a bunch of other friends, and we get a chance to connect.
And Mark Grunden.
They're
we get those heavy hitters.
There you go.
There's me. So.
And it was so fun our first chance to connect, to hear this conversation has been something that you've been passionate about for some time. But before we get started, quick facts, story, give everybody a breakdown. Who is Mark? Where does Mark come from?
Yeah, I hail from the great state of Wisconsin, and I now reside in the great state of California. So I'm in Southern California in Orange County. And
it sounds like a diversified portfolio. Not comfortable accepting California fully?
You always, you love the place that you are, but you always have affinity for your
Are you
roots.
Running from something or to something, Mark?
Well, I am here in Dallas now, so we'll see where those things go. But no, it was, so I have a mix of business and ministry in my past. So, when I was 9 summers, when I was going way back, adolescence, 9 summers from age of 12 to 21, I was somewhere overseas on a mission trip every summer for 8 to 11 weeks. And that, tell you what, that really shapes your life when you spend your teens in really different global contexts and understanding and being exposed to the cultures of the world. So there was a natural desire when all your mentors are people who are in ministry to go there yourself. And so I wanted to be a pastor. So I moved in and started working at a church plant in Las Vegas, of all places, and went really rough. And then the Lord moved me in a real interesting way into business and found these fantastic, I came alive in a really incredible way. And then eventually found my way after working in a family company and then starting my own business, then finding myself working for Saddleback Church as a missions pastor and a small groups pastor, and really always really bridging both of those two worlds, business and ministry together, and really navigating that. And so it's really interesting how the Lord's journey has brought me to a place like Faith Driven, which our goal is to help see that integrated in people's lives.
All right. So fun fact, how many stamps on the passport? What are we looking at?
Well, nowadays they stopped stamping them, but if they were to continue, I'm right at 43 countries around the world.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fun. It's fun, the global perspective that it gives, especially for the work of what you've been in, the work that you are in, the partnership that we have in that is really fun to see. But take everybody back to some of the history of Saddleback, because I think there's something important here to know that a lot of the faith and work conversation, whether it's people like Rick and Helen and others that have been really faithful about seeing this conversation about faith and work vocation that has been there over the years, that you were a huge part of for many years. Talk about the roots there that happen at Saddleback.
Something that we always say at our church is, you can't make the waves, but you can learn how to ride them. In Southern California, a bit of surfing culture. So when you look out into the water and you see the surfers out there, you know that they're not making the waves, but they have learned how to ride them. And the same way, we can't create the waves of the Holy Spirit and what he's doing, but we can become people who learn how to discern what God is about, and then we can choose to be about those things. And so the story of Saddleback Church is really an incredible one of Pastor Rick Warren, seeing a need that was where God was moving, and then discerning that and stepping into that place, and just seeing this incredible ministry built over time. The work and faith ministry of Saddleback Church has been there since the early 90s. So the very early years of the church, of recognizing a need to be able to engage people with their faith and their work, because the majority of their time is spent outside the life of the church. So Saddleback Church has always been very unique in having a mindset and wanting to encourage ministry and encouragement for people. And I think that's been a big play, that mindset, at least in terms of recognizing that the church is a place to empower others, whether it's in the ministries of the church or where God is calling them outside. It's been a big part of it.
That's so great. It's been great to see that. It's been great to see churches like Redeemer, Saddleback, and others that have been such a big voice in that conversation. I think of our shifting us into kind of some of the conversation around just kind of some of the data. I think we've all had some of these hunches and these like suspicions of what God has been doing through some of these conversations at churches. But recently we had the chance to partner with David Kinnaman and Barna Group, really just to say, hey, is there a there? Is something happening? And kind of what's this like locker room moment where we can see just kind of where the movement has been and kind of maybe where it might be going. And so it was a fun experience. I think it was probably about a year's project of researching kind of some of the trends and some of the things of what were happening. Share some of the things that stood out to you as you looked at that data. What are some of the things that really stood out from that Barna report?
Sure. One of the most striking data points that came back is that society at large, they respect entrepreneurs 2 times more than pastors of the churches in their community. And being a pastor, that's sometimes a little bit confronting. How come we're voices of integrity and of hope in our communities, and yet I think in this era where just society has a general negativity, and speaking about United States alone right now, but here in the United States, there is a general, it isn't necessarily a positive perspective on the church by society at large. And so whether it's politicians that oftentimes don't do what they say, or some of the scandals that have happened within prominent figures in the American church, entrepreneurs who are business leaders are seen like, we know what we're going to get. We don't necessarily fully trust them, but for what they say, they're actually going to do. And people see that played out over and over again. So from a pragmatic approach, people look at business leaders as people of integrity, at least in terms of they're going to do what they say and they're going to make something happen. So I think for me, coming out of the church and recognizing if the church in this season, in an environment that has, or a society that isn't looking at them entirely favorably, or as even though amazing things are happening within the church, the news isn't necessarily going to cover those things and give us the positive press that we'd hope for. The way that we're going to make a positive contribution or impact in the communities that our churches sit within is really by empowering the entrepreneurs, business leaders of our communities and of our congregations to take that front row leadership voice in those communities. So for me, that figure of society respecting entrepreneurs 2 times more than churches shows that an opportunity exists, that we can partner with those that are within our own congregations.
Yeah, and I think there's an important part that you're alluding to is like, let's not see this out of a scarcity mindset. It's not an either or. But when you look at some of the trust factor of what you're talking about, and some of this data, it's available on the Faith Driven Entrepreneur website, and we'll flash up on screen where you can find that. But what we're talking about is the normal hero of the moment has changed. Whereas in the past, people might turn to the celebrity cause, government, or other things to kind of say, hey, what is the solution here in the moment? We've seen that change. And I think to put hard data to it, was like 8% like trust factor in terms of government, church in the high 20s, but entrepreneurs come in at like 65, 70% trust factor. And so there's a moment there that we can say it's not an either or moment, it's a both and. I think that was one of the things that stood out to me is nearly 7 out of 10 entrepreneurs believe that when the church and when business leaders and entrepreneurs kind of come together, that, man, there's a really good chance of solving some of the big problems of the world. In fact, like again, 70% of entrepreneurs believe that when they come together that they can solve some of these great problems of the world. I think it really speaks to the opportunity of coming together around that.
Oh, definitely. There is, that 7 out of 10 entrepreneurs that believe that when that collaboration and partnership happens, that we're able to solve the world's greatest problems, should be such an uplifting and encouraging stat for pastors, recognizing that the entrepreneurs and business leaders, these high capacity individuals, don't see themselves as wanting to do it alone out there. They have businesses that they're running, but they see that the local church is the heart of the community and wanting to come in and partner with their pastors to be able to help solve the problems that are all around them. So when we're there at church and we're engaging, and God is stirring in the heart of a business owner, and they come and they meet a pastor in our patio. For us, we're this outside patio, whether it's a foyer for other churches, and we're engaging with the pastors, and we see God moving. They're like, well, they don't know how to engage, right? They know at some level that they need to do business with integrity. They can, model Christ-likeness in their workplace. They're shaping the culture of their own businesses, but how can they go beyond the walls of their own business? So they come to church and they're looking for ways to engage. And unfortunately, most of the time, churches, everybody's about their own thing. And so churches are also about their own thing. And so usually a pastor will then give them one of two things: a cup of coffee to participate in the hospitality ministry, or a parking jacket for them to help with parking. Those are two big needs, easy to plug in, easy to get involved. Hey, you're going to show up next week, just take a cup of coffee and help us serve it. But what we're looking at these individuals is that are business owners, high capacity leaders, is they're looking for a way to leverage their expertise to partner with those pastors. And that's sometimes a conversation that pastors that, at least here in the United States, that have been professional pastors their entire life, don't necessarily know how to engage with. They know how to mobilize people and to bring them in, but what does partnership look like with with these leaders of their church? And that's what I've been really excited about, the resources that we're providing, because here at Faith Driven, we set the table for those conversations to happen. In just the high quality content and the inspirational stories that come out, it connects a pastor to the heart of an entrepreneur in a real incredible way, where that entrepreneur feels heard and understood, and it speaks about it in a language of really kingdom mindedness. Yeah. And I think that's just been really exciting for me.
I think that's a big thing. So there's a huge intimidation factor that we have to get past. I think that there's a lot of times this unspoken thing where the pastor might be intimidated by the perceived success or the success that they have of that entrepreneur in the community, and maybe people know them or whatever it might be. But if we're honest, the entrepreneur is also carrying this level of intimidation of saying, gosh, if I get into this conversation, man, that pastor probably knows more about me. He might feel intimidated about my lack of biblical understanding or knowledge or scripture, whatever it is. There's that intimidation thing we've got to get past. But I think what you're hitting on is even if we get past that, and once we get past that, there's this kind of how moment that we kind of find ourselves in, where the church really, I think deep down, wants to put somebody into action, but they're struggling with the how. And I think that was one of the other things about the Barna data that struck me is we should first celebrate what like churches like Saddleback and others have been championing for so long is, hey, our work matters. And so if you find this data in the Barna report, you can see that 80, 90% of these people, of entrepreneurs, now feel this calling, feel this intentionality of, man, my work matters. I've been given these skills to make a difference. But a majority of those same entrepreneurs that want to are struck with this kind of how moment. And it feels like that how moment is really kind of what's kind of coming to define kind of the chokehold. And I love how you've described kind of the difference of like why entrepreneurs are different in the church and just some of the things that stand out, that they're not just consuming. Can you talk about just kind of like how you've observed the power of partnering kind of with entrepreneurs?
First, I think is we got to define entrepreneur. For those on the business side of this conversation, it's easy. We just a natural word for pastors. A lot of times that might feel like a Zuckerberg or somebody at a high level tech company that's moving something, and that might be true. But really, entrepreneurs are the business owners, that they have a local business that is operating in their city, or they have some online retail presence and they're selling something. They're offering some sort of service to add value to other companies. And so when pastors begin to understand, these are just people that are running teams of people, and to be able to provide a solution, they begin to see that, that these people, they are some of the greatest problem solvers that are in their congregations. These are the people that have very good, leadership mentality in terms of leading teams and shaping cultures. And they operate at very high capacity because they come in with so many responsibilities, because the payroll of their organizations rest on their shoulders, and because the vision and the future of their companies that they lead rest on the efforts that they put into the organization directly. They're oftentimes the time allotment that they have to serve is very small. So at ministries with our church, when we are looking at involving more people in them, we're really looking for people to participate. We need things to be run. We need people to help with the different ministries that are happening in our church, whether it's children's ministry or the food pantry that we might offer. And that just requires consistent time happening over and over again. But for these entrepreneurs, these business leaders, they don't necessarily have a huge amount of time, but they have a desire to participate and even to partner at a higher level. And so for us in the ministries that I've been a part of, whether it's been in our marketplace ministry or outside in the missions capacity, I would look specifically for the expertise that people have, and then find ways for them to be able to partner in that particular lane that they're in order to recognize that this individual is able to think about something in a way that I'm not even close to. And so my role has always been, how do we become a leader of leaders? As people are looking to engage in a meaningful way within the church that is so important to them, how can we help them find a pathway to use their expertise in a way that partners them with the church?
Yeah, I love that. It just recognizes this idea that there's experience there to tap into, and just that running head start of partnership. Because I think entrepreneurs were naturally born starting, doing, building. It's actually weird for us just to be a participant.
Yeah.
And the question is like, how does the church kind of harness that kind of in this moment of what we step into? So as you think about that, and you think about kind of like the challenges of the entrepreneur here, and really helping people kind of understand just kind of, if you're a pastor and you're walking through this, like, why can't this entrepreneur just join a small group? What are some of the barriers where an entrepreneur might not feel fully known, kind of in the typical life group, church group ministry of a church?
Often entrepreneurs are always upscaling. They're learners. They're trying to understand how to do things better, to do things smarter. And so they are active learners and readers. And so when you look at books that are out there, there's books that are written by great pastors that really affirm our spiritual life with the Lord, and it teaches how to go deeper and further with Him. And then there's books typically by secular business writers are written from a secular perspective about business and how to do business better. But there's very few that really bring those two together. Mm-hmm. And so when business owners are coming to the table, they're looking for how do I bring my faith into my work? How do I bring my work into the church and be able to serve here in a real compelling way? And so I think what needs to happen is that the pastors just need to bring these people to the table.
Yeah. They're one of the great conveners of the city.
Right.
I mean, when you really think about pastors, they have the ability to convene a group like nobody else can.
And so to bring, the pastor doesn't even necessarily have to teach anything.
Yeah.
But really it's just bring them to have these people to be able to share. And that sense of connection and community that for a pastor to affirm them in what they're doing, that their passion actually is their God-given calling for them to do, for a pastor to affirm what they're doing, that's what's going to be a really important thing. When these people, when entrepreneurs are in their churches and they're part of a small group or a part of a men's study, a lot of the challenges that they're up against are issues of payroll or a merger and acquisition that they're up against, or really difficult decisions that they have to make. And if they bring these questions to their regular couples small group, it won't connect at all. Oftentimes, and you'll hear this time and time again as you ask, have you been able to find a sense of connection and community that affirms you in your work? If you ask that simple question, it'll always come back, or typically it'll come back, I haven't. Because there is that life that level of responsibility that they carry that very few people can really connect with. And I think more than ever, a pastor will be able to connect with that because they're a leader of that organization, the church that they're leading, in the same way that these business owners are leading their own companies. Yeah. And so what's really important for these entrepreneurs is that they have a place that they can connect with others that share the same challenges, that are up against the same issues, and are processing in the same way, wanting to be faith forward in their life, wanting their faith to drive the decisions that they're making. But they don't have typically a context in order for them to share those things with others.
Entrepreneurship can be a lonely journey. The weight of leadership, heavy. You've been called to create impact through your business. But here's the truth. Isolation kills vision. Comfort destroys calling. That's why Faith Driven Entrepreneur created our foundation groups. Join 10 fellow entrepreneurs who truly understand your path just for 1 hour a week for 8 weeks. Online or in person. Together you'll explore God's purpose for your business through practical, purposeful discussions with others who really get it. Don't journey alone. Your calling is too important. Visit faithdrivenentrepreneur.org and join a group today. That's faithdrivenentrepreneur.org.
Yeah, I think about like church assimilation. That's a weird word, right? Like community is kind of a big word. But when we look at the church over the last 20, 30, 40 years, I mean, candidly, even since Purpose Driven came out and there was this rise in terms of like, what does it look like to build some of these small group ministries and conversation? A lot of like building of those groups and how people got into groups, it was one of two ways. It was either, what stage of life are your kids in? Do you have good overlap? Or maybe it's geography, like what part of town are you in? And when I think about that, what it's made a recipe for is a lot of entrepreneurs ending up in those groups, as you're saying, where the men's meet, the women's meet, couples meet, whatever it is, part of that group, they just never really feel like they have a place to really talk about the challenges of what they're going through with people that have been there. So you've got kind of people maybe speaking into it that don't have the experience to it. And I think this is one of those moments where it's not necessarily going to take the place of all of that. But the question is, can you find that other place where entrepreneurs can be fully known, where they can walk into a conversation not with a bunch of people that might painfully be looking to shorten their workday, get out of their job and don't like work, but actually find freedom talking to people that was struggling with seeing too much of their identity and work on the other side. And so I think this is one of those moments for us as a church to really wrestle through, man, what does it look like to build community differently? Maybe not in place of, but something to go alongside of it.
You talk about a moment in time, and it's that analogy of looking at the horizon and seeing the waves that are coming and the waves of God that are stirring. The faith and work movement has been building over the past 30, 40 years, and institutions came in 20 years ago in terms of higher education, and then graduates of those have started a number of nonprofits. And I felt this deep conviction in my spirit of that the next decade of kingdom advancement is really going to be led by business leaders. And we're seeing that beginning to form, like with Illuminations and the Seed Company and different things that we've highlighted here at Faith Driven. But it was affirmed when I went to Lausanne. I went as a marketplace ministry pastor and knowing that this was a significant part of that global Congress gathering was going to be about work and faith. And so when I went there, I was blown away. It exceeded all my expectations because here at a conference of 5,000 delegates from around the world, the largest breakout session was the work and faith breakout session. And when I stood there in the room, it had 2,600, over half of the people, 2,600 people were a part of that track. And at that moment, I looked around the room and I just thought to myself, the faith and work movement is being mainstreamed to pastors around the world. And so when we think about movements and moments in time, right now we are beginning to see this movement come into the life of the church rather than just and this is why we've found so much success here at Faith Driven in just a few years of caring and giving these different programs and connecting with our audience is because there was a need that existed out there, a need to be able to connect with like-minded people around their work and their profession and be affirmed that is a sense of calling that they have. And now we're beginning to see pastors beginning to lean in and say, yes, this is something that we want to be able to do. We recognize that if we want to reach our community, if we want to have our church not just be a gathering point and growing, but be a place that we're having meaningful impact and we're commissioning the people of our church into our communities of their places of work, we got to begin with the entrepreneur. We got to begin with the leaders that are out there in the community. It's our entrepreneurs, the business leaders that are sitting on the school boards. They have the ability to influence policy for their communities. They have the stake in, if they have a local business, they have a stake in whether that community thrives and flourishes or falls apart. And so pastors are now beginning to see the importance of, hey, how do we affirm them? How do we make them, commission them as an extension of our leadership and have, bring like-minded people together so that we can, send them into the world that's all around us.
I think you're hitting on something really important. So Lausanne was one of those moments where we could celebrate like decades of like what God has done. Kind of coming back to that how conversation, God is on the move, and it's been fun to see his work, just to sit back and kind of watch it. As it was like an event in Lausanne or the pastors and entrepreneurs gathering that we had just a couple of weeks ago, when over 1,000+ leaders gathered online just to say, there's something here. God's doing something. I think one of the things that we were both struck by after that was, as we fielded conversations, both from pastors and entrepreneurs, people were wrestling with, okay, what do I do next? And I think some people kind of started with this conversation of like, great, like I need to start a faith and work ministry for our church, and we're going to cover the doctors and the dentists and the lawyers and people working on the front lines in the service industry and this and that and teachers, and I mean, you name it, they went through like 20 different professions. And there's a part of that, we look at that and we're like, man, that's awesome. But yet I think that there's something that we miss, like, hey, what's the unique place, the season, or the sequence of kind of how we get started? And I think that's one of these things that we can't miss here, is there's been a lot of people that have had that ambition or desire, but it quickly gets overwhelming. But I think if we look at the history of the church, it's not altogether too different to think like start somewhere that's more familiar to you. I mean, I think about churches I was a part of. Hey, you have a bunch of kids, you've got a youth ministry. Hey, you've got some singles that start showing up. You start a singles ministry. Maybe for those churches that are in a college town, you notice you right next to a major university, maybe you start a college ministry. Whether it's marriage classes, finance, like we've found those sequences to kind of get into. And I think that, again, in this moment where people might feel like excited and ambitious, we've got to find that first step. And so when you think about that first step, why do you think entrepreneurs are one of those first steps for a church to take?
I mean, by definition, an entrepreneur is somebody that starts something, and they recognize a need, they know a solution that can be developed, and they take the initiative to make it happen. And the need is that sense of connection, and the need is the sense of affirmation of what they're doing matters and that God has actually called them to it. And so if we put that task, hey, let's start let's start a small group of entrepreneurs to come around and then dream of what it can be. But let's just start and just have the conversation together. That first step is just getting them around a table.
Yeah.
Having them watch a video that affirms what they've been looking for and what's true about what God's purpose in their life is as business leaders, and then allowing them to breathe life into it. I think oftentimes many ministries, when we see a need, the staff members can step into that space and try to build it out in more of a top-down structure. But in this one, we have the audience that we're reaching are leaders in their own right. And all they're looking for is an invitation to participate.
Yeah.
And an invitation for them to partner with the pastors. They don't want to do it alone. They don't want to be in conflict, but they want the invitation. And they're not going to force themselves into the church. There's plenty of work to be done, but they would love an invite. And so what we found with even just our foundation study is an incredibly easy way for a pastor to bring entrepreneurs around a table together to begin this conversation. And that's just really been the success of Faith-Driven Entrepreneur, that those 8 weeks are incredibly empowering and practical for how they can see God at work in the businesses that they lead.
Yeah, it's a safe place to think that confusion out loud. It's a place to be affirmed in just where God has you. We're not prescriptive on all the different ways of what it looks like, but it begins that conversation. But I want to come back to some of the things of what you said. It's entrepreneurs by nature, we're problem solvers. We start things, we do those things. And I think that for that church that's wrestling with this conversation of, man, should we start the whole faith and work conversation? You just made the case for go where the car is already moving. Go where the momentum is, and you're finding an entrepreneur that's not going to you don't have to twist their arm to see, do you enjoy your work? You've got something to work with. And it's out of that you might spill over and find ways to get more nuanced or to have something for a particular Main Street entrepreneurs or teachers or doctors or lawyers or different things that can spring out of it. But I think that, again, finding that momentum, that early win of people where something is trying to happen is a good place for entrepreneurs, for pastors and entrepreneurs to start. And I think the other part, what you're saying is, there's oftentimes, I think that as entrepreneurs, if we're guilty of a part of this, we are guilty of part of this puzzle. So what part are we guilty of? I think it's strange that we're so known for starting, but this is one area where we've kind of pointed the finger and said, well, only if my church would do this. Well, only if this would happen. And I think that we've got to recognize, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this or watching this, it's on you to take that first step. Don't wait for somebody on a church to really take that first step to something they don't know much about. They haven't seen the history of what's happened. They haven't seen the momentum of what's happening. I think we've got to figure out, how do we take that first step, but to do it in a winsome way, in a partnership way, where it's saying hey, we're more together and not just carrying the scars and the frustration and that. Nobody wants to work with a partner in that perspective. But how would you encourage an entrepreneur to start that conversation? What does that look like for an entrepreneur to do that? Is it, buying them a cup of coffee, lunch? What does it look like for an entrepreneur to have this conversation with their church?
I think the first step is recognizing that pastors have a lot happening. A lot of responsibilities, typically understaffed for the level of programs that the people of their church are really needing or wanting to see happen. And so what this could easily become is, hey, we want to start another thing. And it just becomes another thing of another thing that pastors have to be responsible for. But I think in that sincere way of coming to a pastor, recognizing that there is an entire segment of leaders of their church that want to join their pastor in the vision of their church. But the first step is connecting and having that sense of community with one another, a leadership community. And that first step is just walking through a study together where that pastor could be invited into or just join a couple sessions, just to be able to meet those that are passionate about their work, passionate about the companies that they lead, and passionate about seeing God work in and through them. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, again, this is going to kind of sound a little prescriptive, and we don't want it to be. And yet it's a shame here if on a podcast like this, we don't make clear just like what's available to them. So for a church that's wrestling through this and saying, gosh, well, where do we start? If you've been listening to the podcast, you've probably heard this term, but just to spell it out, this foundations course is an 8-week course. People can go through it in person at their church. We've even had some churches that go through it with their people online. Over 20,000 people, I think, over the last 3 or 4 years have gone through it. 138 different countries. There's a reach to this. The what they would call the net promoter score, customer kind of satisfaction of it, is strong. And so these tools and resources are free. How does a church raise their hand? What does it look like? Why should they contact Faith Driven to sign up for that or for the conference? What's the benefits of that?
Yeah, my recommendation is that we have an annual conference that happens in September, and that can be it's a digitally distributed. So individual hosted themselves, whether it's hosted online or in person, and it's a 2-3 hour event with incredibly inspiring speakers and speaking right to the heart of faith-driven entrepreneurs and what it means to be that. And so by starting with that, whether it's in a conference room or it's in a living room gathering a few friends that are also business leaders, or it's by doing it in the inviting the pastor in on that to be participating, or even if it's at a larger scale of 30 to 300 people that are coming together around there, that's where it begins the conversation. Yeah. And then our foundation series is 8 weeks of going in deep on the marks of a faith-driven entrepreneur and what it means to actually live this out. Discussion formatted, just like any small group. Video is playing with teaching, and then discussion questions that follow that really draw out what it means to be faith-driven as an entrepreneur. That is what the tools that we provide at such a high quality and inspirational level, the type of speakers that are there to draw out and affirm people in this is second to none. I'm newer to the organization. I think I can say that. And that's really what has drawn me in this, is because faith-driven entrepreneur is really a catalyst to this conversation without really a prescriptive, intended outcome besides people fully leaning in to the calling that God has for their life and for the work that He's given to them. And so those are, and for me as a formerly a pastor, those two programs are really simple and fit within the ministry rhythms of our church. And so if it happens on the side, we don't have to get full church, an announcement from the stage. We can just offer that watch party of that digital conference easily, because it's in a small context, or it's easy to reserve a room for that. And then rolling off on a small group study is a real simple next step to be able to walk forward in there, to then see what God can do through it.
More and more pastors are realizing the church can be a launching pad, equipping entrepreneurs to build redemptively and make a real difference. We've made it simple to serve the entrepreneurs in your church and your city. No cost, no catch. Get access to a ready-to-go video series, templates, and tools to host an 8-week foundation group right in your church. Just register with us, and we'll even direct local entrepreneurs to your community. We're building a network of 250 partnering churches across the country, each one featured as a go-to hub for faith-driven entrepreneurs in the area. Want to join the movement? All it takes is a 10-minute call with our team. Visit the link below to get started.
I think it comes back to the point of just like, it's amazing what just a little bit of encouragement, inspiration, validation can do. And so if you're listening to this, as Mark's saying, and thinking, gosh, you know what? I need to get permission from somebody. That's not typically the path that entrepreneurs have traveled. You can coordinate certainly with your church and make that watch party bigger. And yet you're probably already connected to 10, 20, 30 other peers that you've been trafficking with in your church, and saying, hey, what would it look like for us to come together, to have that place, to take the initiative, and make space for this conversation. And so love the conference idea. That's obviously coming up in September. We're thrilled that, Francis Chan and Bear Grylls and some other great video stories of entrepreneurs are all going to be a part of that. And then again, take the conversation further with those 8 weeks. And yet one of the things that what you've been talking about here recently is saying, okay, how do you find kind of these durable places of conversation that maybe some churches, that's their first step. But you and the team are in the process of saying, what does it look like to build these durable places where conversation can exist? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mentioned that it's faith and work conversation has gone mainstream, and there's churches already that get it. That there's pastors that already get it and wanting to say, okay, I want to be the church for entrepreneurs in my congregation and within my community. And if there's pastors that are there that understand that want to be that for their entrepreneurs, is to be a part of our to be a church network partner with us as faith-driven entrepreneur. We're already we have 1,300 people that had participated in our pastors and entrepreneur conference. Out of that, there are people that have just said, I want to be a part of this network globally around the world of churches that are equipping and convening and encouraging the entrepreneurs of our community. And to me, that's really exciting. And I see this movement taking hold. I say to people, Faith Driven is not looking to be the first church of Faith Driven in a particular community. We are seeing something really special that's taking off here. There's a need that we're tapping into where entrepreneurs have come to us as they Google who are other, as they search online, who are other Christian or faith-driven, who are other Christian entrepreneurs, and we're at the top of the SEO. And so they reach out to us because they're really looking for community and to be activated in their faith that way. But as this movement moves forward, we know very clearly that we do not want to be the discipleship platform for these individuals on an ongoing basis. That's what the local church is for. And so this church partnership network is really intended to bring that movement into the church. So by simply offering our annual conference on an annual basis and the foundation series to follow that, and by raising their hand and saying, we're going to identify ourselves as a part of the faith-driven entrepreneur church partner network, is a way for them to be that hub for entrepreneurs of their community.
Yeah. It's great to see that. I mean, I think it's a natural progression of like what's trying to happen. It's a natural thing that's there. And it's also something that when we look at some of these movements in the church and conversations that have happened, whether it's Celebrate Recovery or a financial peace course or marriage studies or different things, you see these networks emerge that as people are beginning to search, we candidly want a place to point them to. And I think that there's just this growing desire where pastors are saying, man, we want to really be an outreach and for the entrepreneurs in our city. We want to be a place where they can feel understood and where they can connect. And I love it how Chip Ingram always just talks about this idea is rarely do you find a growing, thriving church without there being a core of entrepreneurs and business leaders really kind of pushing forward the innovation, the partnership, whatever, the funding, you name it. There's a whole host of ways. And it's a key part of that healthy church. Man, it's so great to be in this mission together. It's just on unexpected yet expected ways that God works. I think we owe Mike Sherwood a thank you card somewhere.
I think we do. He's mentioned he is the master matchmaker of relationships and ministry partnerships that form. So yeah, to Mike, thank you. This has been a joy for me to be introduced to and to be a part of moving forward.
Yeah, it's fun to see how the dots connect. So friends, if you're listening to this and you are not as familiar with some of the things of what we've talked about, here's my encouragement. Don't just be a consumer. Don't be inoculated to content, but really find ways to get in the game. So a couple of the things that Mark was talking about, our conference coming up this September, we are so thrilled to have had so many of you guys host watch parties, whether it's 5, 10 people in a boardroom or it's hundreds of people in a church in a city gathering together. Take that next step. It's really easy. We set the table for you. We deliver the content, the tools, the promotion, and point people to you. But what we're looking for in this moment is somebody to raise their hand and say, I'll be the faithful one to open the doors and to set the table there for that conversation. So check that out. faithdrivenentrepreneurconference.org. You can find that. You can find some of that on the Faith Driven website and find ways to get involved. In addition to that, we also have these Faith Driven Entrepreneur Foundation groups, and we are thrilled to have had over 2,400 different leaders raise their hand and say, I'll be one to lead this conversation. Whether that's online or in person, it's something you can do as conveniently in the middle of your workday to leading a group of faithful entrepreneurs. And you might be sitting there saying, gosh, I'm not this guru. I'm not this expert. I'm not this coach. Well, that's exactly what entrepreneurs are looking for. Is they're looking for faithful people. They're looking for people that are going to raise their hand up. They're not looking for the hype. They're looking for faithful men and women that have had experience in entrepreneurship and that want to pass that on to the next generation. So check those things out. Find ways to get involved. And then lastly, if your church is looking for ways to partner with us and that we can point people to you, there's information about church partnerships there. So I know that's a couple of different things, but our encouragement is don't be stuck on the sidelines. Find ways to get in the game. Always great to be with you, and we look forward to being with you again next week.
Come for content, stay for community. Join a faith-driven entrepreneur group online or in person. No cost, no catch. Visit faithdrivenentrepreneur.org. That's faithdrivenentrepreneur.org.